Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling something I guarantee you've dealt with this very week. I'm talking about those bloated, exhausting, just absolute time sucks of a meeting. You know the ones, right? You get a calendar invite, there's a dozen people on it, but only two folks are actually talking, while the rest of the room is just secretly catching up on emails. Well, pulling from a really insightful article by Roya, we're going to explore how drastically shrinking your meeting size is actually the secret weapon for unlocking massive productivity. Seriously, think about it for a second. Are your meetings just too crowded to actually be productive? Do you feel that constant drag of these oversized, totally unfocused gatherings? I mean, it's human nature, right? We often think inviting everyone is just the polite thing to do. We really want to be inclusive. But here's the catch. What happens in reality is that inclusion completely dilutes the conversation. When you cram 20 people into a room, progress just slows to an absolute crawl. So we're going to look at exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how we can fix it, by stealing a mindset from one of the greatest innovators ever.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer bluntness of that quote, "You're not needed." This actually comes from a pretty famous story about Apple co-founder Steve Jobs. Former execs talk all the time about how Jobs would literally stop meetings dead in their tracks if he felt there were too many people sitting around. There was this one specific product meeting where a marketing executive brought along a bit of a crowd. Jobs just stopped, pointed right at someone who didn't have a clear role, and dropped those exact words. "You're not needed." Ouch, right? Sounds incredibly harsh. But as you'll see, it was a wildly effective way to make sure every single person in that room was adding real, absolute value.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the meeting fatigue problem, unpack that Steve Jobs role, and look at exactly why smaller means faster. Then we'll dive into how to actually shrink your guest list, run a lean meeting, and finally, when you should actually break all these rules. Okay, let's dive into this first part, the meeting fatigue problem, specifically looking at this tug of war between inclusion and efficiency. There's this super pervasive myth in corporate culture that more heads are always better than one, but honestly, the reality is totally different. The more people you cram into a room, the more watered down the conversation gets. Inclusion just for the sake of inclusion actively puts the brakes on progress. When you pack a conference room or, a Zoom call, you aren't just adding perspectives. You're adding side tangents, competing priorities, and just a whole lot of dead air. It is a massive, massive drain on your team's most valuable resource, which is their time. Moving on to part 2, the Steve Jobs rule and bringing simplicity into teamwork. We all know Jobs was completely obsessed with simplicity when it came to Apple's product design, right? No extra buttons, sleek interfaces. But he demanded that exact same simplicity in how his teams collaborated. His golden rule was so straightforward. Keep meetings small and bring only the right people in. Jobs understood that if you didn't have a clear role, if you were just there to listen, you simply shouldn't be in the room. And this approach wasn't about being exclusive or mean or leaving people out just for kicks. It was 100% about efficiency. Keeping meetings tight is about giving the people who are there the space to actually speak up, debate, and make a decision. It's really about bringing the right people in, not just keeping the wrong people out. So the crucial point is really understanding why smaller actually means faster, which brings us to the mechanics of efficiency. Why exactly do these smaller groups drive such bigger results? Well, when you compare them side by side, it's pretty glaring. In large meetings, you get those diluted conversations and completely off-topic tangents. But honestly, the worst part is the diffusion of responsibility. Think about it. When 20 people nod and agree on something, who's actually doing the work? It's totally confusing. Now, flip that to a small meeting. You get way faster decision-making simply because there are fewer voices to wrangle. You get laser-focused engagement because, hey, when you're not just one face in a crowd of 20, you know your input actually counts. And most importantly, clearer accountability. With only the key players sitting there, there is absolutely zero confusion about who owns the next steps. All right, let's get into the practical stuff with part 4, shrinking your guest list, basically your pre-meeting blueprint. To build out this blueprint, our source brings in a brilliant framework from another major tech titan, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. He enforces what's famously known as the 2-pizza rule. The rule is just wonderfully simple. Basically, never hold a meeting where 2 pizzas couldn't feed the entire group. It's such a tangible, highly visual way to enforce crowd control. I mean, if you find yourself ordering a 3rd pizza, boom, you've got too many people in the room. Let's move to and see how this builds directly into a super actionable 4-step checklist you can use before sending that calendar invite. Step 1, limit the guest list. Just ask yourself, who absolutely needs to be here? Step 2, define clear roles. Every single person needs a purpose. Are they making a decision, offering specific expertise, or taking an action item? Step 3, cut the spectators. If someone is just going to sit there and listen without contributing, yeah, they don't need to be there. Just shoot them the meeting notes later. And step 4, stick to a tight agenda. Since your team is small, keeping focus is a breeze, so make sure that agenda is lean and immediately actionable. So you've got the right people. Now let's hit part 5, running the lean meeting, focusing on in-meeting execution. Okay, so you've got that curated essential group in the room. How do you actually keep that hard-won efficiency going? According to the article, there are 5 crucial things you gotta do once the meeting starts. First off, start with a clear purpose. Open things up by stating exactly why everyone is there and what specific decision needs to be made today. Second, assign roles right off the bat: who's leading, who's taking notes, and who's on follow-up duty. Third, time box those discussions. Because you've got a smaller squad, you can move so much faster. So put a strict time limit on each agenda item and literally do not let it drag. Fourth, keep the energy focused. If the chat starts drifting, just gently but firmly pull it back to the main point. And lastly, always close with clear next steps. With a tight group, delegating is a piece of cake. So make sure everyone walks out the door knowing exactly who is doing what. But hey, we're not being dogmatic here. Let's look at part 6, when to break the rules and the exceptions. To be truly practical in the real world, we've got to admit that sometimes you really do need a larger crowd. Just take a look at these specific exceptions. First, all hands updates. When you need to get the whole company aligned on big goals, obviously you need everybody there. Second, brainstorming sessions. Sometimes you just need that massive diversity of thought to spark innovation. Though, quick side note, you still need strong facilitation to keep it on the rails. And third, cross-department collaboration. If a decision is going to impact multiple teams, you absolutely have to have those key stakeholders in the loop. The ultimate takeaway here isn't to never have a big meeting. The goal, as the article really drives home, is just to be intentional. Don't let huge meetings be your default. Only use them when the situation actually demands it. So we've seen how just shrinking your guest list can completely transform your meetings from exhausting time wasters into these powerful little engines of progress. Now it's time for you to actually take action. I want to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought. Take a hard look at your calendar for tomorrow. Look at the meetings you're running. Based on everything we just talked about, who are you uninviting tomorrow? It's time to take back your time, protect your team's focus, and start running smaller, faster, and just fundamentally better meetings.